Okay, so lovely to see everybody again for our new semester of ESA RN32, so the Research Network on Political Sociology, a series of lunchtime seminars. And we're really happy to have with us today Maria Chiara Franceschelli from the Scuola Normale Superiore in Florence in Italy, who's going to talk to us about a very topical subject, which is the Milan-Cortina Winter Olympics and some of the debates and politics going on around things like the building of infrastructure for the Olympic Games. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Maria Chiara. And yeah, please go ahead, Maria Chiara. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, can you hear me well? Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's very exciting for me to be able to be here and present our research on the Olympics while the Olympics are in progress. And it's a great sport event for all sports lovers, including myself. So I hope that this will not spoil the experience for you, but at the same time, we'll be able to give you a bit of background information on what's actually going on in the places that we see every day on TV. So can you see my screen? I suppose so. Yeah. So the title of this presentation, it's Anger Game, Mega Events as a Model for Territorial Development in Marginal Areas and the Milan-Cortina Winter Olympics. Very long title, and it's already a spoiler of many things that we are going to talk about today. But before that, a little bit of context. This project, this presentation, this research is part of a broader project of which Luisa is one of the two PIs, together with Lorenzo Zamponi, which is the co-author of the paper that I'm presenting today. And the project is called Transform, Driving Transformative Environmental Governance. And in this project, we look at how civil society actors drive change towards transformative environmental governance. So how they shift away from governance models that see the environment as a set of resources to be exploited towards more alternative and sustainable models. So what models they propose. We have a wide array of different cases, but the common theoretical background that we use basically separates the action strategies of these different civil society actors in two categories: by demanding and by doing. By demanding means that civil society actors exert pressure on policy and decision makers through advocacy and collective action. So let's say a more traditional maybe strategies of collective action, while by doing refers to a more pragmatic and prefigurative implementation of change, so by which civil society actors implement the change that they want to envision autonomously from governing actors, and then only then policy change will follow. And today's case is the Milano-Cortina Winter Olympics. And in this context, we're looking at the conflict over environmental and territorial policies. And this is a by demanding case. And ultimately, when it comes to the Olympics, the debate centers around the development models in urban and marginal areas. So marginal areas is one of the key concepts that I'm going to talk about today. So I will provide a brief overview because the literature on marginal areas is very rich and I don't want to delve too deep into that now. So let's start from saying that when I speak about marginal areas, I don't refer to a strictly geographical concept. Marginal areas is a political concept that refers to areas that are being pressured by different phenomena that are related to global economic and political forces. So marginality, the marginality of marginal areas is not a result of geographical isolation per se, but of different forces that co-occur and have different results based on the specific cases that we're looking at. Among these phenomena that interest marginal areas are deindustrialization. So marginal areas are often post-industrial areas that from industrial become post-industrial due to globalization and delocalization. they often experience tourist transition. So they shift from being industrialized area to touristic areas, and often without consultation of local communities. And they experience welfare erosion and rationalization of public services, which reinforces in an endless feedback loop, reinforces the condition of infrastructural insufficiency that exacerbate the geographical marginalities, because of course marginal areas are often marginal also in a geographical sense. They're remote, they're far from urban economic center. They also face scarce political representation because the conventional form of representation of peripheral and rural interests, which are usually parties or category association, are being eroded. And so we can address here the elephant in the room, which is that neoliberal policies have caused severe pressure on marginal areas and economic vulnerability and social fragmentation. Connected to the concept of marginal areas is often the concept of the left behind. So the so-called left behind are the losers of globalization, as Crisi et al. Defined them. So the people that somehow lost in the globalization process. And because of that, marginal areas are often depicted as the core constituencies of reactionary politics. And they politicize the grieving of marginalization and the feeling of resentment against the established liberal democracy. There is a rich literature about that, and many other scholars have written a lot about this, and this is not really the core focus of our theoretical framework. But what we want to stress in today's presentation is that marginal areas host a lot of collective action and participation strategies that can be inside or outside the electoral milieu. But collective action in these areas is far from rare. There are a lot of collective action types. Today, we're going to look especially also at LULU mobilization. And by LULU, we mean locally unwanted land use. So mobilization against locally unwanted land use. But more broadly, we fit into this research branch by looking at how marginal areas are context of participation and mobilization, and what kind of political participation we can see in marginal areas. And in this context, we add a specific element, a crucial element, which is the element of mega events. In Italian, it's grande evento. So mega events are usually planned in urban areas, such as the Expo, the World Cups, other sports events like the Olympics, the Biennale, the COP, the G8, G7, G20. They're usually planned in urban areas. But what happens when mega events are planned in marginal areas, so in areas that are already pressured and that face the very, very crucial challenges that I exposed you before? Basically, as other people found, they become a developmental shortcut. So they substitute long-term territorial planning in favor of a short-term vision of territorial development. So we use the mega events to boost territorial development in an area that is facing crucial challenges. But in order to do that, they spark simplified procedural checks, which, by the way, is also what has been going on with the Olympics. I'm sure you might have heard or read something in newspaper about how nothing was ready for the Olympics. Of course, I'm generalizing and simplifying, but in order to be prepared, in order to be organized, in order for everything to be ready and set, many procedural checks, so audits related to environmental infrastructure, environmental safety, infrastructural safety were bypassed. And this is not something that relates to the case of the Olympics especially, but it's something that happens when mega events are used as a developmental shortcut. And of course, another core element of this is the rhetoric of touristification and visibility. So we're going to host the event in this place, and because of that, this place will become a crucial tourist destination. All the world will find out about this place and find out how amazing this place is. So this will automatically bring economic development. But of course, hosting mega events in marginal areas means that there are specific dynamics related of the political economy of the mega event that involve different actors. Very often decision-making is top-down. So when mega events are hosted in marginal areas, as I will show you very soon, it's not usually local communities that participate, and there are the protagonists of the organization of these mega events. And sometimes they even excluded from the decision itself to host these mega events. But the most important part of this is that costs and benefits of hosting mega events in marginal areas are distributed asymmetrically. So the marginal areas are divided into two groups. There is a small elite benefiting from the mega events, and all the others bearing the cost. And these obviously increase the socioeconomic inequality. So what happens usually is that mega events often reproduce marginality by staging inclusion while they actually entrench dependency and local hierarchies. And everything that I have told you now is something that we observed during our data collection, but it's also something that is established in the literature. So this is the context in which this research navigates. But now, more specifically to our case study. As I told you today, we're talking about the Olympics. And as you know, also from the name, the Olympics this year do not take place in one city, but they are somehow dispersed. They're called Milano-Cortina, so obviously we have Milan and Cortina, but there are actually so many other places, and which you have seen on TV. There is Bormio and Livigno as another core component of the Olympic stages, and then other minor locations in which other services are being provided, such as press conferences and these kind of things. But we have a cluster of three main locations, which is Milan, the urban areas, and the marginal areas of Cortina d'Ampezzo, which is a very famous tourist destination, and Bormio and Livigno, which have already hosted important sports events such as the Alpine Ski World Cups and so on. And now a bit of background information. So the urban-alpine divide in the Lulu mobilization. This is a part of our research for the Transform project. We have, Lorenzo and I have investigated how the mobilization against the locally unwanted land use has been framed. So we adopted frame analysis. And we found that marginal areas and urban areas have framed the mobilization against the Olympics in very different ways. In urban communities and urban movements have focused on a very conceptual criticism regarding the Olympics. So they have articulated a protest that is based on the concept of social justice, environmental sustainability, and right to the city, and right to the mountains, and right to the sports. Clearly, this is a very specific frame, so it's linked to specific groups. It's not a broad mobilization, but it's linked to urban leftist groups, and it's against extractive logic of neoliberal capitalism. And when I say this, I am echoing the way that they present it. So they explicitly talk about neoliberal capitalism and other very broad concepts. So it's a protest that it's very conceptual and it's very political. While in marginal areas, the protest against the Olympics has been framed as a territorial issue. Mobilized groups adopted a pragmatic approach to contestation. It's apolitical in the sense that it's not related to a political fringe or a political group, but it's broadly shared because very different political groups or people holding very different political views and position have united again, like in the contestation against the Olympics based on different arguments that are anyway related to territorial development and territorial issues. And we then come to our research puzzle. So how is this participation different? So I just showed you very briefly that the participation in urban areas and in marginal areas is very different. We have a lot of literature on participation against mega events in urban areas, also because urban areas are very often held, because mega events are very often held in urban areas. But we don't know that much how mega events reshape political participation in marginal areas. So we are asking ourselves what happens when mega events take place in marginal areas and how this affects political participation. What is this political participation like? We look at meaning and structure. So we look at what it is like to be a marginal area. So how local communities perceive themselves, what kind of collective vision they uphold. But also we look at more structural and relational dynamics of participation. So the infrastructure of political participation in marginal areas against the mega events. For today's presentation, I will focus on the Valtellina region, so Bormio and Livigno. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the area, but Valtellina is a very, very long valley that stretches from, let's say, the Lake Como to Bormio, which is where the competition are being held. And between Lake Como and Bormio are almost 180 kilometers. So it's very long. And then, of course, you have, let's say, all the smaller valleys that are, let's say, perpendicular to the big valley that stretches from the lake to Bormio. So it's a very big valley, which is quite unusual also for the Italian alpine morphology. And it used to be quite industrialized. So don't imagine necessarily only the pristine, green, untouched, unspoiled. It used to have a very, I would say, vibrant industrial development. So we'll focus on this specific place. The method that we've used is basically an ethnography. We have conducted in-depth interviews and we have done participant observation. But most importantly, I have spent a lot of time, like several weeks in Valtellina in different time periods, like closer and farther from the Olympics dates. So also this kind of data is based on countless informal conversation. And also I want to state here that my role as a researcher was explicit. So now I will move on to the more empirical part. So I will show you what came out from this investigation. Please don't be scared by the wall of text that you will see in the next slides. These are excerpts from the interviews that may be interesting for you or maybe not, but I just wanted to give you the whole context. But let's say that one of the major problems that arise when it comes to the participation and the mobilization against the Olympics is the fact the whole process that led to holding the Olympics in Bormio and in Valtellina showed a substantial lack of democratic accountabilities. So basically, the local authorities, the regional and municipal authorities have taken this decision to hold the Olympics in this place without collective deliberation, without hearing the opinion of the local communities. And when the dwellers of the valley just came to them and said, we actually don't want this for this and that reason that we will see very soon, there was no accountability, there was no exchange. So in a way, the milieu of the political decision looks like a very far castle, a castle that is very far from the voices and the opinion of the local communities. And at the center of this criticism is also the fact that the referendum, which is usually a procedure that is, it's not legally binding, it's not compulsory in the assignation of the Olympics game to a certain city, but it's usual, it's customary. Usually national authorities hold a referendum in the area that is supposed to host the Olympics to see whether the local communities agree with this, they want it or not. So this referendum was denied. Local community asked for a referendum, do you want the Olympics? And it was denied. And this was at the center of the criticism. But a core component of the criticism against the Olympic Games is the fact that they cause infrastructural deterioration in a place that is already pressured when it comes to infrastructure. So the problem is that, as we said, mega events are used as a developmental shortcut. So they're used to say, these mega events will improve everything, will bring relief to an area that already faces a lot of difficult challenges. But this is not factually true. But they're also used as a developmental shortcut in order to unlock infrastructural projects that were already planned, but they somehow had to overcome a very, very long and difficult procedural checks. So what happened? When the Fondazione Milano-Cortina, which is the foundation that oversees the Olympics organization, was allocated the Olympic Games, they were allocated a budget for the infrastructural improvement of the regions that were hosting the Olympic Games. And in this set of improvements, many different infrastructural processes, so bypasses, overpasses, infrastructure like the ski stadium, sports venues, were inserted in this, let's say, portfolio of different projects that should be carried out in order to provide the adequate context for the Olympic Games to occur. And among these projects were very sensitive projects that were not approved in the past, and that because of the urgency that have characterized the Olympic Games and the organization of the Olympic Games, all the procedural checks were bypassed. But these projects are not seen by the local communities as a necessary improvement to their infrastructural shortcomings or the condition of infrastructural inefficiency. So, for example, when there is among these portfolio of projects, there is a project of an overpass in the, say, the lower Valtellina. And people are protesting against this because it's just not true that building an overpass will actually improve the current traffic situation. This is just a patch. It's not a solution. This project will actually benefit to the pockets of the companies that are in charge of building this overpass, but not actually the local communities. And again, this is related to our previous element of the lack of democratic accountability, the lack of deliberation. So in a way, the organization of the Olympic Games is seen as yet another brick in the wall of infrastructural deterioration that characterize marginal areas. So yeah, of course, the unequal redistribution of costs and benefits. So the big stakeholders, so what the people indicate as the big stakeholders, so the companies involved in the construction of this portfolio of projects that have been unlocked thanks to the allocation of the Olympics, will be the one benefiting from the Olympic event. While the mortals, as my interview defined as, so the common people that were not involved in the process of allocating the Olympics, will experience a lot of trouble. There will be peaks in traffic, there will be overflow with visitors, with tourists, and their daily life will be disrupted without having any substantial economic comeback or benefit. And then, of course, there's the huge issue of public funds. So clearly, this portfolio of infrastructural work that have been unlocked with the Olympics is all funded by public funds. And this is a very sensitive issue because in an area like Valtellina, but like any marginal areas that has to face a severe infrastructural challenge, this is seen almost as a provocation. In the picture that I put in this slide, you can read prima la sanità, non le Olimpiadi, ridateci il Morelli, which means healthcare first, not the Olympics. Bring back Morelli. Morelli is a hospital that was basically dismantled by the National Health Services, and it was united infrastructure with another hospital that is nonetheless 100 kilometers far from the location in which the Morelli Hospital is located. So in practice, what does this mean? It means that the people living in those villages, in that town, do not have a hospital anymore. And this is one of the major examples of this kind of discourse by which people have experiencing the constant and gradual but steady erosion of public infrastructure, especially very sensitive public infrastructure like national healthcare. And then they see a huge amount of money being channeled into a project that they did not approve of and that they did not even discuss with local authorities or with regional authorities. So this is seen as a provocation, and the Olympics are perceived as a waste of public funds that could be instead devoted to ensure social and infrastructural security. What is interesting is that people protesting against these mega events in Valtellina have a very strong community-based approach. I was also undecided whether to use the word identitarian, but then we know that in sociology, when people start talking of identity, they usually refer to very specific theoretical framework, which are not the one that we are using today. So I focused on community-based approach. But what I mean here is that at the root of this political activation against the Olympics is a very strong sense of territorial belonging, of communitarian belonging, of local belonging. So I am part of a local community that is rooted in this area in its most concrete and geographical sense. So, for example, among the portfolio of infrastructural projects that have been unlocked with the Olympics is the project of basically building a small portion of a highway in an area that has not been used for construction ever. So a green area that has been untouched. This is like really unspoiled. And as I told you before, Valtellina is a rather industrialized valley. So it's not that easy to find just a green, unspoiled, untouched piece of land, a patch. And it's also not very easy to find a flat land because Valtellina is a very long but very narrow valley, and it's surrounded by mountains. You have the Italian and Swiss Alps on one side, and then let's say the Pre-Alps that connect with the Padania Valley on the other side. But there is one, and it's called Alute, the Alute Plain. It's in Bormio. It's very close to Bormio. Maybe you can even see it from the aerial, from the drones. In like when you look at the Olympics on the TV. And for the people of Bormio, this green patch has a very sentimental value, I would say, because it's seen as the local green lung. Like the last green lung of a territory that has witnessed huge land speculation because of tourism and because of industry. So clearly, the project of having it destroyed for building a piece of highway that is not even deemed so necessary for local development and for local infrastructure has been incredibly threatening and scary to the people of Bormio. And the way that they have protested against this is by using community-based symbols, is by using a rhetoric of belonging, of territorial identity, which is shared across very different political groups. So regardless of what your political position is, if if you feel some love, some affection, some belonging for the land that you were born in and for the land that you inhabit, you can join this mobilization. This was more or less the way that it was constructed. And then a very important element that characterized the political activation in Valtellina against the Olympic is the high social density. High social density is a technical fancy term to say that everyone knows each other. So we're talking about small alpine villages. Valtellina is quite highly inhabited for being an alpine valley, but it's still made, it's not an urban area, clearly. It's made of a constellation of small villages in which everyone knows everyone. Everyone knows each other. And this highly impacts the way that people activate, that people mobilize itself, especially if you put it in comparison with urban areas. So usually, I will give a very clear, straightforward example. If people in Milan protest against the Olympics, they go to the square and they protest. And they usually use a very strong radical discourse also against authority, against the police and everyone trying to repress this protest. A language of, let's say, political contestation that I'm sure that every one of you is familiar with. But this cannot happen in Valtellina because people are connected to each other by personal relationship. So the mayor that formally approved the project of the Olympics, that accepted the project of the Olympic when it came from the regional government, is my uncle. Or the chief of police is my neighbor who has seen me grow up since I was 9. Or the people working in the company that is actually in charge of building the highway is my elementary school teacher. I mean, obviously not. This is a very an example, but you see that in such a small place, personal relation get in the way of how participation is constructed. And this is not necessarily a bad thing for the mobilization itself, meaning that this is not something that necessarily inhibits the mobilization. On the other hand, my interviewees have highlighted how this actually promotes a more fruitful dialogue. So in a way, the tone of the mobilization is less radical, so the mobilization is toned down. But on the other hand, people listen more because people know who is speaking, and maybe they have you in high consideration because they know who you are, and they cannot deem you as, you know, a violent demonstrator or whatnot. So this sparks very different modes of political activation and also political confrontation among different and antagonistic parts that are not possible in urban areas, and that, on the other hand, influence very much the tone, the frame, and also the radicality of protest in this kind of places. A good example also of how mobilization are constructed in different ways in urban and in marginal areas is the one that I'm about to tell you. This picture was taken during a demonstration in Bormio. It was a walk. The demonstration was organized as a walk across the Olympic venues. And it was 1 year ago, it was in January 2025, and the Olympic venues were still very much under construction. So it was a walk across the construction sites. And the people organizing the demonstration, the people from Valtellina, were explaining the reason why they did not want the Olympics to happen. And they called in solidarity urban groups from Milan to come there and to provide support. And people from Milan came. It was a highly participated demonstration. There were hundreds of people. We can see in this picture a person holding a Palestinian flag. It was one of the demonstrators from Milan, and this also this flag was brought to stress the intersectionality of the revendication. So in a way to stress the highly political, the highly conceptual framing of the protest against the Olympic. So the Olympic against exploitation, basically, dynamics of exploitation that can find many things in common with a very different and immensely more violent and on an immensely larger scale kind of exploitation that is currently going on in Palestine. This was very clear in the eye of the mobilized group from Milan. But in the eye of the local community, so the inhabitants of Bormio, people living in Bormio, they were very confused by that. And during the demonstration, there was actually a small conflict. People started arguing, like locals started arguing with this person. Why did you bring a Palestinian flag? What does this even have to do? For them, they perceived it even as offensive because somehow this person was seen as trying to move the attention, to shift the attention away from the cause at stake, so the mobilization against the Olympics, and to bring it to something else, regardless of how important it can be or how important it can be perceived. This was seen as offensive. So this kind of conflict clearly embodied the difference in participation dynamics, in framing dynamics, but also in infrastructural dynamics of participation that characterized the mobilization against the Olympics in marginal areas and in urban areas. So, to conclude, what does this tell us about state-civil society relation in marginal areas? So, the criticism against the Olympics was also pointed to the feudal system, the so-called feudal system of regional administration, whereby local communities and municipalities are subject to the regional authorities for yearly budget allocation and cannot forward their own interest in policymaking. Oops, sorry, I cannot. Okay. And politics is devalued by legal framework and participation is structurally blocked. So people were pointing at the fact that the relationship between states and civil society lacks the necessary elements of accountability that characterize a functioning democracy. And in this case, for us, it's very interesting to consider marginal areas as laboratories in the sense that they reflect the present condition of specific territories. So in a way, marginal areas are places in which, let's say that the falls of democracy take place and take place way more intensely than in other areas, but that somehow are shared with other areas. In this sense, democracy. And they may also represent the future of other regions, as we were saying earlier about tourist-driven transition, shaping national dynamics. So to conclude, what the collective action in marginal areas tells us about political participation in marginal areas. The focus is not the mega event per se, so as it happens in the Milan-based collective, but on the related infrastructure. So in this case, the mega events, the Olympics, become a catalyst for conflict that remain anchored to the infrastructure, to territorial development and to territorial dynamics. It's not about what the Olympic represent politically, ideologically, conceptually, but it's rather about the concrete implication of the Olympics. The Olympics become the background. The Olympics become the driver of this participation, but are not anymore the core of the criticism. A weaker movement infrastructure tends to produce post-ideological framing. So, as I said, the mobilization against the Olympics is not framed ideologically or politically. For example, the mobilization to defend the green lung close to Bormio that I was telling you before has never ever been framed using the word environmental, ambientalista in Italian. all the people that I interviewed regarding this mobilization in Bormio, almost all of them told me, we are not environmentalists. Do not write anywhere that I'm an environmentalist, che sono un ambientalista. Also because this is a region that has been administrated by center-right government and not also far right over the recent years. So in a way, the environmental tradition here is much weaker, and this is also interesting. So we can see the emphasizing of pragmatism over ideological positioning. The territorial identities override other identities in the sense that the mobilization becomes a defense of our territories rather than a broader political ideological stance, as I told you before. So the identity that is at stake here is not a political identity, but a territorial identity. And as I said earlier, the high social densities encourages non-contention, low confrontation forms of participation, but also enhances exchange. It facilitates condition of exchange with local municipal authorities. The politicization of community-based territorial ties shows that local civic network becomes political channels in lieu of traditional forms of political participation like parties or trade unions. And also, the way the local administration take part in this is contested. Local administration that are currently administrating the region are seen as a part of a broken system, the system that does not ensure accountability to local community. But people that used to take part in local administration first can also be seen as advocates of the territories. So they retain brokerage and legitimacy even when they are out of office. And with this case, I refer to the case of the former mayor of a village called Montagna in Valtellina, which has been at the forefront of the protest, despite the fact that she hasn't been formally mayor for years. So this was it. As I said, the research is still ongoing. So I'm very excited to present you in very different ways with papers, everything like more precise and concrete results in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria Chiara. I think we can stop the recording.